All right, welcome to the Explainer. Today we're tackling a concept that's probably going to challenge literally everything you thought you knew about productivity, focus, and, well, getting stuff done. We're unpacking something called the architecture of silence, priming the mind for study. Now, I want you to just pause and really chew on that word for a second. Architecture. It implies structure, right? It implies deliberate design, a strong load-bearing foundation. You know, before you build a massive skyscraper, you don't just start tossing bricks on the grass. You have to prep the ground. So today we're going to see exactly how silence isn't just, a lack of noise. It's actually positioned as this incredibly powerful, purposeful structural tool for your mind. We're going to learn how to build with absolutely nothing at all, and why that might just be the absolute strongest foundation you can create for deep learning. So, is boredom the ultimate study tool? I know. It feels completely ridiculous even asking it out loud. Normally, we run from boredom like it's on fire. We think of it as the absolute worst enemy of engagement, right? Like the literal opposite of learning. But think about your own habits for a second. When you feel even a tiny moment of stillness, what do? We instinctively grab our phones, we throw on some lo-fi beats, cue up a playlist. We do literally anything to avoid just sitting there being bored before we start working. We are terrified of the quiet. But the material we're looking at today completely flips that on its head. What if that uncomfortable, itchy feeling of boredom, that massive urge to just grab a distraction, is exactly the disruptive tool you actually need to unlock deep focus? What if the cure to a scattered mind isn't more stimulation, but a sudden, massive drop in it? And that brings us back to this phrase, the architecture of silence. It carries some serious structural weight. In this context, silence is absolutely not painted as some passive state where you're just twiddling your thumbs waiting for time to pass. No, it's an architecture. It's an invisible framework that you proactively build around your study session. Think of it like this. Before you can construct really complex ideas in your head, you have to completely clear the construction site. You need a perfectly flat, solid foundation. Because if you try to build something delicate on top of chaos and debris, it's going to instantly collapse. And that foundational layer, surprisingly enough, is made of pure silence. It's a deliberate, intentional void that gives all your learning a solid place to anchor itself. Okay, let's dive into this and look at the actual definition. The boredom prep is the act of sitting in silence before studying to prime the brain. And I want you to notice how boredom is framed as an actual defined technique here. It's a specific preparation phase. It's kind of like a pro athlete doing a strict warm-up routine right before a sprint. So boredom in this sense isn't an accident. It's not just what happens on a lazy Sunday afternoon. It's a highly strategic maneuver you actively deploy right before you crack open a textbook or tackle a complex project. It's an intentional gateway, really. You're making the choice to pass through this uncomfortable state of boredom so you can transition from the total chaos of your day into the deep, locked-in concentration you need for genuine learning.
Which means we need to completely rewire our mindset here. Embrace the boredom. This prep phase is not a distraction, and it is definitely not a waste of your valuable study time. By actually leaning into the boredom instead of fighting it tooth and nail, you're intentionally clearing away mental clutter. I like to think of it like a snow globe. You know when it's all shaken up? You're making a conscious choice to just put it down and let the snow settle into its base state before you demand your brain to do any heavy cognitive lifting. Because look, when you try to jump straight from a hyper-stimulating video game or doom-scrolling social media directly into, say, organic chemistry, your brain absolutely rebels. Embracing the boredom acts as that mandatory buffer zone between high stimulation and deep focus.
5. Just 5. When you look at the grand scheme of your busy day, it is an incredibly small time investment, right? It's literally a drop in the bucket. Yet this entire architectural structure of silence we're talking about rests entirely on this single, highly achievable parameter, just 5 minutes. Now sure, it's long enough to be genuinely uncomfortable if you're super used to constant dopamine hits, but it's also short enough that you literally cannot use "I don't have time" as an excuse to skip it. So, the crucial point is we are talking about exactly 5 minutes of absolute, complete silence. We are not talking about 5 minutes of casually checking your texts while the TV's on in the background. We aren't talking about taking 5 minutes to casually tidy up your desk while humming your favorite song. It requires a complete and total absence of input. It's a strict boundary, a designated void that you have to set up right before the real work kicks off. Because think about it, if there's input, there's no boredom. And if there's no boredom, well, the prep simply doesn't work. You really have to just endure the quiet.
All right, let's map out the procedure. It is incredibly minimalist. Step 1, sit in silence. Step 2, wait 5 minutes. Step 3, begin studying. I know, it sounds almost ridiculously simple, doesn't it? But the real psychological challenge is in the execution. Sitting and waiting and doing absolutely nothing to stimulate your brain is a massive shift from our usual frantic, high-momentum crash landing into a study session. That second step, just waiting for those 5 minutes with zero external dopamine hits, that is where the real heavy lifting happens. Your brain is going to absolutely scream for a distraction. It'll beg you to check your email, adjust your lighting, maybe go grab a snack. Surviving that impulse, that is the entire point of the exercise.
Let's move to and see how this builds on an actual timeline. At minute 0, you sit down in silence and you just endure the onset of the boredom. This is where the friction is at its absolute highest. But by the time you cross over into minute 5, a very specific neurological transformation has happened. Your desperate craving for rapid-fire stimulation has actually subsided, and it's replaced by a steady, calm baseline. And then, right at minute 6, you officially begin studying. We're anchoring this whole methodology in actual trackable time. You have to treat the prep phase with the exact same respect and structure as the studying itself. Think about it. You wouldn't skip the first 5 minutes of a final exam, right? So you definitely shouldn't skip the first 5 minutes of your cognitive preparation. And this brilliantly illustrates the ultimate neurological payoff here. Sitting in silence primes the brain. Think about what it actually means to prime something in the physical world. If you're painting a wall, you don't just slap the color right on the drywall. You apply a primer first. The primer smooths out the surface, it neutralizes whatever old, distracting colors are underneath, and it guarantees that the new paint is actually going to stick permanently instead of just peeling right off. This 5-minute boredom prep, that is your cognitive primer. It smooths out your scattered attention, it completely neutralizes all the residual thoughts bouncing around from your day, and it ensures that all this complex study material will actually stick to your mind over the long haul.
Let's really contrast these two states of mind. Over on side A, before the 5 minutes of silence, your mind is totally unprimed. It's buzzing. It's full of residual momentum from a conversation you just had, a YouTube video you just watched, or whatever task you just walked away from. It's completely fragmented. Trying to learn in that state, it's literally like trying to write an essay on a piece of paper that already has a messy draft scribbled all over it. But look at side B. After the architecture of silence has been established, the mind is primed for study. It's a clean slate. This incredibly clear, measurable shift that happens during this brief 5-minute window completely transforms you from a passive consumer of fast information into an active architect of deep knowledge.
So let's lock in these core components. These are the absolute, non-negotiable takeaways you need to cement into your routine if you want to be a focused learner. First up, remember that the boredom prep is a deliberate technique, okay? It's not a passive accident. Second, it requires a strict 5 minutes, no cheating. Third, it demands complete silence. Put the phone away. Fourth, the direct, hard-earned result of this is a primed brain. And fifth, only once that foundation is firmly laid down are you truly ready to study. So there it is, the complete architecture in 5 simple but radically effective bullet points. And remember, if you skip even one of these elements, the whole structure just isn't going to hold. Which brings us to our final parting question. We've broken down the exact mechanics of the boredom prep. We understand the profound underlying goal of priming the brain through this architecture of silence. So, will you dare to sit in absolute silence for 5 minutes before your next study session? Seriously, will you actually embrace the discomfort of being bored just to build that unbreakable foundation? It's an incredibly minimalist approach for sure, but doing absolutely nothing, that might just be the most powerful way to begin. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Now get out there and go test this architecture for yourself.